We boarded a plane bound for the United States. Our destination was Silicon Valley. If we didn't have money, we would have chosen the cramped economy seats with layovers. But due to having some flexibility, we booked a direct first-class flight. We sat in our seats and unpacked our belongings. How long until we arrive? About 10.5 hours. I might as well get some sleep. Taekyu changed into his pajamas, reclined his seat fully and closed his eyes. I sipped on the wine brought by the flight attendant, contemplating our future plans. I never imagined when I first started investing that I would come this far. In a capitalist society, money equals power. As wealth increases, so does influence. Even if a cat frolics freely, no one pays it any mind. But what if that cat grows as large as a tiger? This is our current situation. Our initial asset of around $10 million has grown to hundreds of billions, earning us global fame or notoriety. Even if one has no intention of dominating others, there's a natural human tendency to want to leash and control those who become powerful. Whether in politics or business, they will try to control us in some way. So, should we willingly let them put a leash on us and crawl into our circle? After the S14 incident, I reached out to Taekyu, telling him to stick with it till the end. It wasn't just empty words. If we're going to stop now, we might as well not have started at all. To avoid being led around with a leash around our necks, we need to make sound judgments from now on. Our weapons are the cash in our accounts and the companies we hold stakes in. If our foresight is correct, they will grow into billion-dollar enterprises. And as for allies who can provide assistance, there's Golden Gate. As the world's largest investment bank, Golden Gate has deep roots in U.S. politics and business, emerging unscathed from various conspiracies. They are an entity in Korea that cannot be treated lightly. However, they are merely allies of necessity. While there is a link like Hyunju Nuna, it remains uncertain whether they would help us at the cost of suffering losses if something were to happen. A business alliance is not always a bad thing. Sometimes, a relationship forged through mutual benefit is more reliable than weak loyalty. As long as it is mutually beneficial, it means not betraying each other. While sorting out the complicated thoughts in my head, a massive continent revealed itself. The airplane landed safely on the runway at San Francisco Airport. I woke up the sleeping Taekyu. Get up. Have we arrived already? Yeah. The weather outside the window was sunny. It was afternoon when we departed, but it was morning upon arrival. We changed our clothes and got off the plane. Europe has been suffering from terrorism and illegal immigration recently. Perhaps due to this atmosphere, immigration checks in the United States have also been strengthened. After passing through immigration, picking up our luggage and exiting the immigration hall, a man in a black suit was standing holding a placard with our names written on it. He was a young man who appeared to be around the same age as me, tall and handsome. I remembered a conversation with Chase Southwell a few days before departure. I heard you are going to the United States. If it's okay, we would like to provide security and guidance on our end. I accepted without any reason to refuse. The young man reached out his hand. Thank you for coming. I'm Henry. It's an honor to escort you. Nice to meet you, Kong Jin-ho. I'm Taekyu. Please take care of us. As we followed him out of the airport, the gentle California sunshine poured down. Just by looking at the weather, I could understand why everyone wanted to live here. A limousine was waiting ahead with two men who appeared to be bodyguards standing in front. One of them had an earpiece in his ear. On closer inspection, the bulge in his suit pocket looked like a gun. Is it a gun? It's not unusual for bodyguards in the United States to carry guns since firearms are legal anyway. We got in the back. Please take us to Palo Alto. Silicon Valley is a huge city. We arrived at a building in Palo Alto. Here is where Caro's headquarters and research center are located. Taekyu was impressed by the company. Wow. Although we have cash in our accounts, we own companies like this. Upon our arrival, the CEO, Daryl Sagan, came out to the entrance of the building. Just like when we first met, he was dressed casually in jeans, a t-shirt and sneakers. Daryl warmly welcomed us. Welcome. It's been a while. It's been a while. He is one of the few who knows that I am the CEO of OTK Company. You've been up to big things since we last met. I was surprised when I read the news. It was obviously about Brexit. I laughed. I was lucky. I'm really glad the company didn't change owners. We only invested money, we didn't do anything. Daryl chuckled at my words. Thanks to not doing anything, the company was able to grow. Compared to the days when it was struggling due to unnecessary interventions, we are in the best environment now. In fact, it's not easy to invest money and not interfere with management. However, we didn't touch on any management-related issues. We believed that companies that were doing well would continue to do well, and those that were failing would fail anyway. We toured the company with Daryl's guidance. Perhaps because it started as a startup, the company culture was relaxed. Even when the CEO walked around, employees continued their work without paying much attention. In the research lab, computers were constantly running. Various road scenarios were displayed on dozens of split screens. What's that? Autonomous driving. We're using simulations to enhance learning capabilities. According to Daryl, they had already covered over 3 billion virtual miles, conducting experiments involving various accident scenarios to accumulate data. Of course, in the reality of the road, many variables are at play, so actual road driving is still evolving in parallel. We looked around inside and headed to the meeting room. There about 10 employees were already waiting. They could be considered as Kairos key personnel in management and development. Among them, some familiar faces were seen. They were Ryan Gates and Sergey Ivanovich, whom we had met in Korea before. Seeing them again felt welcoming. Daryl introduced us to the employees. These are the people from OTK company. The employees looked at us with surprised eyes. They probably didn't expect such young Asian men to come to receive their subsidiary's financial report. As we sat down, CFO Sergey first presented the current management and financial situation. It was a rather long presentation, but the conclusion was simple. Taekyu said to me in Korean, "Why did he talk so long about not earning a penny and running out of money? A company is one of two things. Either it makes money or it eats money. Currently, Kairos is in the latter category. Companies need funds endlessly for survival. Therefore, they either sell goods to make money or attract funds from outside. If the funding stops, the company comes to a halt." We bought an 86% stake in Kairos for $88 million from Eun Sung. We negotiated and put most of the $12 million discount back into development costs. But before a year had passed, we ran out of development funds. We had to take out some loans using the building and patents as collateral. Now even that money has run out. At this point, you might understand why Eun Sung let go and sold. Without any immediate results, the investment was still ongoing. There was no guarantee of future success. It must have been like pouring water into a bottomless pit. Yet the water in that pit began to slowly rise. After Sergey's presentation, CEO Ryan continued. Over the past year and a half, Kairos has been dedicated to developing an operating system for autonomous driving, including artificial intelligence. Now they are nearing completion. Ryan confidently said, "When I see completion at 100%, the current technology is at 95%. Taekyu said, "Isn't that almost a completed project?" As Daryl tilted his head and said, "God is in the details. If this were just a simple software, some errors might be tolerable. However, errors in self-driving technology are directly linked to life and death." The company that has been most aggressively incorporating autonomous driving technology into cars is the newly established electric vehicle company Tesla. However, a few months ago, Tesla's S model was involved in a major accident while in autonomous driving mode. It was a collision with a white truck on the opposite side of the road. The reason why the vehicle did not stop upon encountering the obstacle was absurd. On that unusually clear day, the camera responsible for recognizing obstacles could not distinguish the white truck from the sky. As a result, the car crashed into the truck without reducing its speed, and the driver died on the spot. This incident demonstrated how even a slight error in autonomous driving can lead to extremely fatal consequences. Facing criticism, Tesla stated that the autopilot system is not autonomous driving, and drivers should always pay attention to the road ahead and be able to control the steering wheel and brakes at any time. However, if that's the case, why use autopilot at all? In autonomous driving, not even the slightest mistake is acceptable, and Kairos was heading in that direction. Although not yet complete, it was evident that they were advancing towards the completion stage. With the current technology alone, they had already surpassed level 4 of autonomous driving and were approaching level 5. Do you grasp the significance of this achievement? Since the inception of transportation, having a driver was common sense. This was the case when transitioning from horse carriages to automobiles. But now we are entering an era where drivers are no longer necessary. Cars parked in parking lots will come out when summoned, and they will automatically go to charging stations when low on fuel to recharge their batteries. Driving will become a hobby, not a daily necessity. Sounds like something out of a science fiction movie, right? However, this is something that will actually happen, and that time is not too far away. Experts generally predict that within the next 10 years, autonomous driving will reach its completion stage, and driverless cars will be on the roads. It is widely known that autonomous driving is the core technology of the future car industry. Therefore, car manufacturers and IT companies are all vigorously accelerating their technological developments. Just half a year ago, Karos couldn't even join that group and no one paid attention to him. But now the situation has changed. There are two core technologies for future cars. One is autonomous driving and the other is electric cars. If the former is software, the latter can be called hardware. We are securing software technology among the two. So, which is more important between software and hardware? Certainly both are important. But if I had to choose one, I would choose software. Especially if it's an operating system. It's possible to imitate hardware technology. Korea caught up with Japan that way, and China is catching up with Korea in a similar manner. Can't software be copied as well? Of course it can. In some ways, it can be imitated easier and faster than hardware. However, there is one major difference between the two. When IBM was a major corporation, Microsoft was merely a subcontractor producing software. But when Microsoft's OS was chosen over IBM's PC OS, the situation reversed. Subsequently, Windows dominated the PC OS market, not only in business computers but also in home computers. A similar situation later occurred in smartphones. Developers of the smartphone OS Android approached Samsung Electronics for acquisition. However, Samsung Electronics, which was developing its own OS at that time, rejected the proposal, and Android ended up under Google's umbrella. What happened next is almost self-explanatory. With Google's support, Android captured more than half of the global smartphone OS market. Samsung Electronics, struggling in the smartphone market for a while, eventually gave up its own OS and released the L series with Google's Android installed. Fortunately, thanks to relatively quick adjustments, they established themselves in the market and even attained the title of Apple's rival. However, lacking their own OS meant they had to keep following Google in the smartphone market. Samsung Electronics later introduced a smartphone with a new OS called Typhoon, but by then the market was completely dominated by Android and iOS. The most crucial aspect of software is not how good it is but how many people use it. Windows did not dominate the market because it was the best operating system but because it seized the market. What Karos develops is not just autonomous artificial intelligence, but an operating system that can control the entire car. As the technology reaches the final stage, automotive companies have begun to shift their stance as they realize how remarkable this is. Currently, Toyota Group, Daimler Group, and Unsung Group have approached us for partnerships. What are they asking for? With numerous precedents already set, they won't be asking for anything that benefits others. In response to my question, the spokesperson said, they are requesting a stake in Karos. This is why we have come this far. If Karos were as overwhelmingly dominant as Microsoft's Windows or Google's Android, there wouldn't be much of a problem. They probably would have just asked to make it usable for themselves. However, the autonomous driving market is just about to open up, and most companies already have proprietary technology. Karos clearly possesses the most advanced technology compared to them. But it's not like there's someone in the development team who traveled back from the future or brought an alien over technology. It's just the result of exceptional talents making well-informed decisions and moving fast compared to others. Just like Isaac Newton saying about standing on the shoulders of giants, new technology is essentially a culmination of existing technologies. In other words, what Karos has developed could be replicated by other companies if they choose to. How far ahead are they really? In my opinion, they've got about a 3-year head start. While 3 years might sound like a short time to catch up, we're not just sitting idle here waiting to be surpassed during that time. Depending on how they proceed, they could catch up or even pull further ahead. Regardless, it's certain that other companies will reach where we are in 3 years. Though if they hesitate here, they might just get caught up in no time. In this situation, several leading automotive companies have proposed technology partnerships and equity exchanges. I asked Daryl, what do you think about these proposals? If you develop great software but don't have the hardware to utilize it, it's useless. In that sense, it's welcome. For Karos's technology to be meaningful, it needs to be integrated into vehicles. Delaying commercialization gives other companies a chance to catch up. All in all, it's not a bad thing. If managed well, software and hardware companies can exchange stakes and grow together. It ensures Karos secures automotive companies as allies. However, being a small to medium-sized company while they are giants, the possibility of being pulled around is high. And that's not the scenario I envisioned. Among the companies where OTK company holds stakes, which one is the most valuable from an external perspective? Let's face it. Faceit already occupies 30% of the access rate to American porn sites and is profitable through paid subscriptions. However, in my opinion, it's different. The difference lies in the market size. No matter how big the porn market is, it can't compare to the automotive market. Even if you can live without watching porn, can you live without a car? Maybe some people can. If Karos succeeds, it will dominate a unique position like Windows on PCs or Android on smartphones. Of course, existing automotive companies won't just stand by. They will probably first bend a knee and extend a hand. What if we refuse? Sergey nodded gravely at my words. We will face constraints and pressure. As you know, current automotive and IT companies are joining hands and rapidly advancing their technological capabilities. We need to form alliances quickly. I cannot be unaware of this fact. After all, Karos itself is a company created by the collaboration of AMZ, Hitachi and Unsung Motors. Ryan also interjected, competition is intensifying. You are aware that Samsung Electronics acquired Herman for $8 billion a month ago. Although known to the public as a high-end audio brand, Herman is actually a powerhouse in the automotive-related B2B market. This acquisition signified Samsung Electronics entering the autonomous driving and automotive field. They aim to overcome their lagging technology through mergers and acquisitions. Rumor has it that Samsung Electronics provided the money when a financial company lent funds using Karos shares as collateral. If this rumor is true, Karos would have ended up with Samsung Electronics if we hadn't repaid the money on time. Leaving aside technological issues, Karos's current situation is not so rosy. They need continuous investment, but cash is running low, risking missing the window for commercialization. Perhaps cooperating through a partnership, even if it means giving up shares, can alleviate immediate challenges and expedite commercialization. However, that's only if things go well. They could end up just an average company dependent on multiple automotive companies, or after some collaboration, those companies might snatch up their technology. Judging by the atmosphere, it seems they had discussed giving up some shares and the extent of cooperation. Well, given the circumstances, they probably didn't have many other alternatives at the moment. If they had planned to give up shares, I wouldn't have bothered coming this far. I looked around the meeting room and proposed a new idea. Let's just make cars. Everyone was taken aback by my words. It seemed that they never even imagined such a statement would come out of my mouth. Daryl asked in astonishment, What do you mean? I recounted something he had said to me before. In the past, cars were just machines powered by internal combustion engines. But now they are evolving into giant electronic products. Machines could operate solely on hardware, but electronic products always required software. We have the software. So instead of being dragged around by hardware companies, let's make the hardware ourselves. Steel is often referred to as the staple of industries because it is the fundamental material on which industries are built. That's why even in Korea, we used the reparations we received from Japan to build a steel mill in Pohang. If steel is the staple of industries, then cars are the meal made from that staple. If a country develops and manufactures complete vehicles on its own, we can roughly estimate the level of its industrial and technological capabilities. Therefore, it's not an exaggeration to say that cars are a concentrated essence of all industrial technologies. Making it ourselves will take too much time and money. Money is not a problem, but time is. From sketching to the finished product. When will we be able to complete it? The automotive industry is undergoing rapid changes. Experts predict that the changes expected in the next 10 years will be greater than those that have occurred in the past 100 years. To seize the opportunities brought by these changes, we're considering acquiring automotive companies. Money is soon to be an opportunity. If it were pre-Brexit, aside from alliances, it would have been hard to find other solutions. But currently we have $3 billion in cash. With this amount we can acquire most automotive companies and still have leftovers. After finishing the meeting, guided by Henry, we headed to the accommodation. It was the top floor room of a 5-star hotel. Inside, the duplex structure overlooked the San Francisco Bay through glass walls. As Taekyu entered, he exclaimed, "Wow." I looked around inside and said, "This is too good for just the two of us." Henry smiled and said, "I'm glad you like it. Feel free to let me know if you need anything. This must cost over $10,000 for one night, right? Even though we're Golden Gate VIP customers, they seem to be treating us exceptionally well." After Henry left, we plopped down on the sofa. Taekyu grabbed a cola from the minibar and tossed it to me. We usually don't use hotel minibars, but it's fine since we're not paying. Have you looked into any car companies to acquire? If we have the money, there are plenty to buy. But it's not as simple as it sounds. Acquiring a car company is different from acquiring a startup. Car companies come with brands, factories, numerous workers and subcontractors. Due to their significant impact on the local economy, not only contracts between parties but also government approvals are necessary. Depending on the situation, they may receive active support. However, once you invest, it's hard to withdraw. Therefore, acquisition decisions must be made carefully. If we make a wrong purchase, it could become a money-eating pit. Taekyu sipped his cola and said, "But if Unsung Motors is the goal, can't we just join hands with Daimler or Toyota and compete?" Wow. It's a great opinion that's hard to believe came out of this kid's mouth. But when Tesla first made an electric car, existing car manufacturers laughed at it. The performance was not great, it couldn't run for long, charging took a long time, and on top of that they said who would drive such an expensive car. But as the electric car market opened up, Tesla saw explosive growth. Currently, Tesla's market cap threatens even that of Unsung Motors. Autonomous driving technology will change the world more than electric cars. To completely dominate that market early on, bold investments are needed. Building an alliance excluding Unsung Motors is one way, but in that case, other companies end up benefiting. Regardless of emotions towards Unsung Motors, business is business. If we have enough investment capital, why should we share with other companies when we can eat it all ourselves? Taekyu nodded. Well, producing both software and hardware like Apple seems like a good idea. Apple produces smartphones, PCs, and tablets with their own operating system. They earn huge profits from both software and hardware, securing the top position in global market capitalization. There's no law saying we can't become like them. As they spoke, they started feeling hungry. Dinner. I told Henry. Unlike workaholic Hyunju, Taekyu and I believe in enjoying life moderately. Even if we came to the US for work, we should also do some sightseeing and enjoy delicious food. So we suggested to Henry to have a meal together and asked him to find a good restaurant nearby. Ding dong. Suddenly the doorbell rang. Opening the door, Henry was standing there. "We are ready. Shall we go?" We got into the limousine waiting in front of the hotel. While on our way to the restaurant, Henry asked us, "My grandfather happens to be nearby. Would you mind if he joined us for dinner?" I nodded. "Yes, that's fine." The restaurant was located just outside San Francisco. It had a cozy atmosphere, more like a home than an upscale restaurant. Following the guidance of the staff, we entered to find the inside set up like a garden with chefs grilling steak orders on one side. Oh, it smells so good. We sat at the reserved table. As we placed our orders and waited, a man dressed in a suit approached us. He was an elderly man with a neatly groomed white beard and a thin physique. Perhaps in his 70s. His wrinkled face was adorned with golden-rimmed glasses, a gold ring on his finger, a cane in one hand and a fedora on his head. Felt like seeing a Western elder character straight out of a TV show. The old man spoke. "It's been a while, Henry." Henry introduced the old man to us. "This is my grandfather." They resembled each other so much that it was obvious they were related. We stood up from our seats to greet him. "Hello, I'm Kong Jin-ho." The old man looked at me with a childlike expression. "Meeting the CEO of OTK Company. I'm truly delighted." Does he know about me? Judging by Henry's expression, it seemed he was aware too. Although no one asked me to keep it a secret, I didn't know that everything about me had been disclosed. "Is it okay like this?" With a smile, the old man seemed to know my thoughts. "I've heard about your contributions from a friend." "A friend?" Chase. This old man is a friend of Chase Southwell? Taking off his black fedora, the old man politely introduced himself. I apologize for the late introduction. My name is James Clark Goldman. Taekyu spoke in Korean. Your name sounds familiar, where have I heard it before? I opened my eyes wide, lost in thought. Wait, could it be James C. Goldman? The CEO of Golden Gate, known as the recluse investor? Financial professionals are not as well known as typical entrepreneurs. While many may know the CEOs of Samsung Electronics and Unsung Motors, most people are unfamiliar with the CEOs of Hanshin Bank and KYB Securities. The same goes for foreign companies. People might recognize the CEOs of Apple and Facebook, but they probably wouldn't know who the CEOs of Citibank and JP Morgan are. There are likely few who even know the name of the CEO of Golden Gate. However, I am well acquainted with the name James C. Goldman. Not because he's a business partner, but because he's a renowned investor famous enough to be featured in business textbooks. He had steered Golden Gate long before I was born, commanding not only the U.S. financial sector but also making waves globally, capable of moving billions of dollars with a single word. While I was surprised, Taekyu still appeared clueless. In Korean I said, Golden Gate si. I realized language didn't matter much at that moment. Wow. So our sister's boss. Exactly. The CEO of Golden Gate is known to reside in a mansion near Manhattan. How did he end up here? Surely he didn't fly across the continent just to meet us. Or did he come to see his grandson and coincidentally bump into us? Was that even possible? Given that Henry acted as our guide, it might be safe to assume he intended to meet us from the start. Since we're here for dinner, let's sit and talk. James took off his coat and sat down. We followed suit. I couldn't believe I was about to have dinner with James C. Goldman. Seems too surreal to be true. If I told others, no one would believe me. The sudden turn of events was both surprising and ecstatic. Taekyu, observing my expression, softly asked, "Is this such a big deal? Are you saying that?" In some ways, it can be said to be even more impressive than dining with Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett auctions off his annual lunch for charity. James C. Goldman doesn't even appear in public and only does media interviews and writing. There isn't even a single photo of him on the internet. The nickname, reclusive investor, isn't just for show. That very figure is now right in front of us. Well, Taxi probably won't care much anyway. It's an honor to meet the CEO of Golden Gate. But how did you end up here? I heard you came to the US, so I rushed over a month ago to meet you. I was surprised by those words. You came all the way from New York to California just to meet us? Just then the steak I ordered arrived. It's a happy day, would you like a glass of wine? Yes, please. Henry ordered wine from the waiter. We filled our glasses and toasted. From the L6 crisis to venture capital and now Brexit, the venture of OTK company is truly amazing. I modestly said, it's nothing compared to the achievements of a reclusive investor. James smiled wryly at my words. Do you know why I don't reveal myself to people, avoid the media? No one knows the exact reason. They can only guess. Maybe it's due to social anxiety, physical disabilities, illness, being too grotesque in appearance and so on. But upon meeting in person, it turned out to be quite the opposite. His personality also seemed lively. James said in a low voice, "This is a secret only close friends know." We naturally leaned in, curious. Now what secret could there be? Actually, I'm not good at investing. I have no eye for the market, let alone an intuition for investments. What? What kind of talk is this? First, I thought it was a joke. The CEO of Golden Gate not being good at investing is as absurd as a swimmer not being able to get into the water. Just the stories of legendary successes I know could fill several books. Above all, I still don't understand what ABS, CDO and MBS are. When I was young, the principles of financial products were very simple, but at some point I started operating in an unknown manner with unexplainable terms. Wasn't Golden Gate the main creator of that? I may be saying something unnecessary, but there is also the fact that the massive issuance of MBS, mortgage-backed securities, collateralized by mortgages and CDOs, collateralized debt obligations, collateralized by MBS contributed to the U.S. financial crisis. When speaking in front of the public or the media, I don't know what to say. So, I tried to hide as much as possible, and before I knew it, I began to be referred to as a secretive investor. I asked in confusion, Did you predict the Plaza Accord and bet on the yen? It was Nakamoto's decision when he was the Japan branch manager. Did you buy Asian real estate at rock-bottom prices after the Asian financial crisis? That was Chase's idea as the Asian branch manager. Did you sell bonds just before the Ukraine conflict broke out? Dmitry played a role in that. James said as he sipped his wine, "The one thing I'm confident about is my ability to read people. When I meet and talk to them, I can somewhat judge whether they are trustworthy enough to be entrusted with something. In other words, are you excellent at mercenary tactics?" Golden Gate, not only in the US but also worldwide, was able to exert strong influence because regional branch managers operating independently contributed their part. And the person who appointed them was CEO James. While thinking about it, when Quantum Fund attacked the UK foreign exchange market, the one who actually devised the operation was Stanley Druckenmiller. However, the public only remembers the name George Soros. James turned his gaze to Taikyu. In that sense, I consider myself a no less exceptional investor than Mr. Kong. No less than Mr. O's talent recognized Mr. Kang's talent for the first time, didn't it? Taikyu blinked in surprise as he had a piece of steak in his mouth. Me. Didn't Mr. O recognize Mr. Kang's talent for the first time? I nodded. Yes, he did. If Taikyu hadn't reached out to me first, if he hadn't removed his stake and yielded the CEO position to me, I wouldn't have made it to this position. Having lived to this age, the only certainty I have is about investing in people. Similar words have been heard multiple times. Words are more important for who said them than their content. Coming from the CEO who led Golden Gate for decades, the weight of his words was different. Investing in people. Am I doing well now? Chase says that if you meet these two, you'll gain not just good customers but good friends. I hope our connection continues in the future. Of course. After the meal, we stepped outside. A Rolls-Royce Phantom was waiting in front of the restaurant. We shook hands in front of the car. It was a pleasant meal after a long time. If you need any help while you're here, feel free to tell Henry anytime. Got it. Take care. James got into the car. Meeting the legendary investor you only read about in books in real life. It doesn't feel quite real. At this rate, am I going to meet Warren Buffett later too? I spread out the materials I received from Hyunju Nuna on the table in the hotel room. What we need is a car that can be equipped with the software developed by Keros. Keros is developing an operating system that can control everything from ignition and battery to autonomous driving. To properly utilize this operating system, an all-electric car that operates on electricity is ideal. Taikyu asked, arms crossed, acquire an electric car company? They are too expensive. The electric car companies already established in the market are too expensive for us to buy with the money we have. If we were to try to acquire them, they would become even more expensive. Although the electric car market has seen explosive growth, the annual sales have not yet reached 1 million units. Considering the current battery production capacity, a significant increase is difficult at the moment. Despite being touted as the next generation of cars, internal combustion engine cars will dominate the market for the time being. Autonomous driving technology can also be applied to current internal combustion engine cars. There is no need to focus solely on electric cars. Of course, that technology will be needed in the long run as well. For now, are you planning to acquire existing car manufacturers? Yes. Just incorporating perfect autonomous driving technology will give us enough competitiveness in the market. Will you launch in the Korean market right away? I shook my head in response to that question. That might be difficult. Why? Because the regulations have not been established yet. Laws such as road traffic laws differ slightly from country to country. Therefore, cars that can operate perfectly fine in other countries may not be able to drive in the domestic market. Autonomous driving is currently illegal in Korea. When will it become legal then? When Unsung Motors develops it. It's not a joke. In the past, features like HUD, remote parking, and laser headlights were also illegal. Global car manufacturers that developed such technologies had to export their vehicles without utilizing those technologies in certain markets. But when Unsung Motors developed the technology, related regulations quickly followed. It's a form of non-tariff trade barrier. Given the significant role of the automotive industry in export and employment creation, the government is diligently protecting it. In addition, Unsung Motors is likely lobbying the political arena. This allows them to boast a domestic market share of 70%. Let's deal with that issue later. I don't know which company I should acquire. The automotive companies currently on the market have either already failed, are failing, or are companies with poor technological capabilities. Well, if they were promising for the future, they wouldn't have been put up for sale in the first place. Don't you have any foresight? No. At times like this, I wish there was an information window right in front of me. It would be convenient. No, would it be inconvenient instead? If all sorts of unnecessary information keep popping up all the time, living normally would be impossible. Maybe it's better if it just comes up occasionally like it does now. Anyway, it's frustrating when you need it and it doesn't come to mind. Ding dong. After contemplating for a while, the bell rang. When I opened the door, Henry was standing there holding out an envelope. My grandfather asked me to give it to you. James C. Goldman? Thank you. After Henry finished his errand and left, I took out the letter from the envelope and unfolded it. There was a short sentence written on it. I heard you are interested in the automotive industry. Then you should pay attention to the U.S. presidential election. From your friend. Come to think of it. It's the U.S. presidential election season now. Brexit is also happening, and this year there are many significant global events. Taiku asked with a puzzled expression, what does that have to do with us? I just said, the automotive industry is closely related to the government. If you are eyeing the U.S. market, you cannot ignore the policies of the next government. Give me the remote. Here you go. I turned on the TV and switched the channel to CNN. A segment analyzing both Democratic and Republican candidates was airing. The current Democratic candidate is Diane, and the Republican candidate is Ronald. There are several other candidates, but they are not worth paying attention to. Suddenly, James's words came to mind. He said there's nothing more certain than investing in people, right? I thought about it calmly. What kind of cards am I holding now and how can I use them well? I wish I could meet them in person. Taiku asked. Huh? Who? I pointed to the TV. Those people. Would they meet you from over there? A good point. Both are figures standing at the pinnacle of the Democratic and Republican parties dividing American politics, one of whom will inevitably become the President of the United States in a few months. Moreover, they are currently busy with campaigning. They will probably be scheduling by the minute, meeting and greeting people. No matter how much money I have, I cannot compare to the traditional wealthy in America. They won't just meet me if I show up unannounced. Is there no good way? Golden Gate not only has a deep historical background but also exerts a strong influence on American politics. It's to the extent that they appear in various conspiracy theories without fail. Perhaps James could connect us, don't you think? /N. Asset-backed securities, ABS. Definition. ABS are financial instruments backed by a pool of assets, such as auto loans, credit card debt, or student loans. Purpose. They allow investors to gain exposure to a diversified pool of underlying assets, reducing risk and enhancing liquidity in financial markets. Collateralized debt obligations, CDO. Definition. CDOs are a type of ABS that includes various types of debt, such as mortgages, bonds, or other loans. They are issued by a special purpose vehicle, SPV. Structure. CDOs are divided into tranches with different levels of risk and return, making them complex but potentially high-yield investments. Mortgage-backed securities, MBS. Definition. MBS are a specific type of ABS where the underlying assets are mortgages. They can be residential, RMBS, or commercial, CMBS. Function. Investors in MBS earn returns from the principal and interest payments on the pooled mortgages. These instruments played significant roles in the financial markets, especially highlighted during the 2008 financial crisis due to their complexity and the risks involved. Wishing you a Diwali that's lit. Love, light, and happiness to you and yours. Cars are heavily influenced by government policies such as regulations and taxes compared to other products. The United States is the most important automotive market. Therefore, the presidential election was a crucial factor. There was no need to ask Hyunju Nuna for help specifically. Even a simple internet search overflowed with information. In the United States, elections are so money-driven that they could almost be considered auctions. Having a lot of money doesn't guarantee victory, but without it, one cannot even enter the playing field. With astronomical costs involved in running an election, most people can't even afford to participate. Ultimately, only the major parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, can provide the necessary funding, so the presidential election always plays out as a battle between the two. Numerous candidates run for president, but since it's essentially a fight between Diane of the Democrats and Ronald of the Republicans, mentioning minor candidates is unnecessary. Let's define Diane in a few words. She is a traditional political figure from the elite American political family. The Underwood family is reckoned among America's political elites, along with the Kennedy and Bush families. Diane's grandfather was governor of California, her father was mayor of New York City, and her younger brother currently serves as governor of Georgia. Numerous other relatives are also deeply involved in American politics. After graduating from Harvard University, Diane, alongside her husband, gradually built her political career. She served as a senator and secretary of state and has now been nominated as the Democratic presidential candidate, the first woman to do so. And Ronald? He's the complete opposite. A true political extremist. Ronald was born into the real estate mogul Stamper family, diving into the real estate business with his father from a young age. Despite facing several failures, he gained fame through TV appearances and successfully rebuilt his career based on his popularity. Nowadays, buildings and hotels bearing his name stand tall in Manhattan. His sudden leap into politics was for the presidential election, not as a senator or governor. This isn't his first time running for president. He showed up in the political arena 8 and 4 years ago, but his actions were quite baffling, boasting about his real estate and golf courses during campaigns, engaging in fights and using foul language in debates. No one believed he was genuinely interested in politics. They saw it as a way to gain fame and promote his businesses. And this Republican primary was no different. In the primary, prominent politicians and the governor of Florida participated. Despite being a strong candidate, his chances of becoming a nominee were less than 2%. The public viewed him as a mere card for the Republican primary's entertainment. However, starting from 1.7%, Ronald's popularity soared steeply as the primary continued, eventually reaching a level where he was competing for the top 2 positions. His campaign trail was nothing short of a solo act. People were more enthusiastic about his blunt remarks and insults rather than the polished words and policy explanations of established politicians. The mainstream Republicans were taken aback by this unexpected turn of events. Eventually, Ronald Stamper, a seemingly eccentric outsider, emerged as the Republican presidential nominee. The method to eliminate a primary candidate is quite simple. Cut off their campaign funds. Without money, continuing the election becomes impossible. However, this method did not affect Ronald, as he was a tycoon himself. If campaign funds were cut off, he would simply use his own funds. Ronald swept aside all established Republican politicians, causing a sensation. Opinion polls indicated that Ronald had less than a 10% chance of beating Diane. Hence, the majority believed he should not be nominated. When Ronald threatened to run as an independent if not chosen as the Republican candidate, a scenario where both Ronald and the Republican candidate would split votes emerged, ensuring a Democratic victory. Reluctantly, the Republican leadership had no choice but to nominate him as the candidate. The Democrats secretly celebrated because an easy win was anticipated when facing Ronald. However, things started to take a strange turn. Surprisingly, Ronald also performed well in the final election. He attracted numerous fans everywhere he went, and his campaign events resembled concerts. We searched for debates and campaign videos on YouTube. Diane, with her poised appearance and soft-spoken demeanor, eloquently continued the debates, persuasively answering even uncomfortable questions. She embodied the typical image of an elite politician. Voters seemed to understand why they supported her. However, Ronald was completely different. Watching the Republican primary debate, we were left speechless. After a moment, Taekyu, coming to his senses, said, "Is this a debate or just a feast of words?" Isn't it more like a feast of words? We read articles, but seeing it firsthand on video was very serious. I will build trade barriers for America. Mexico is exporting drug dealers, criminals, and rapists to the U.S. U.S. manufacturing is being raped by China and Korea. Illegal immigrants are overflowing in the U.S. The media is completely manipulated. Immigrants are stealing our jobs. Profanity, rude language, aggressive expressions, exaggerated gestures, and so on. It was unbelievably vulgar for words coming from a presidential candidate of a country. But aside from that, it's incredibly entertaining. That's true. This belongs more to a comedy show. Could they be purposely aiming for this? Traditionally, Democrats are supported by progressives and Republicans by conservatives. But this election is a bit different. Why is that? Ronald has no relation to Republican politics. You should see him as someone doing his own politics under the title of a Republican candidate. This led to even Republican-supporting businessmen and financiers turning to Diane's side. Even some Republican stalwarts gave up their support for Ronald. Taekyu looked puzzled. Then who is supporting Ronald? That is the critical point of this election. For decades, the United States has stood at the forefront of neoliberalism, spreading the gospel of free trade to the world. Various trade barriers were dismantled, causing factories in the U.S. to move to countries with lower labor and raw material costs, while American capital flowed into the global financial markets. Entrepreneurs and capitalists operated factories in cheaper locations, earning even more money. American workers lost their jobs, with the government playing little role in addressing the situation. These contradictions accumulated and culminated in the explosion of the 2008 financial crisis. Fortunately, the U.S. managed to overcome that crisis, but in the process, seemed to once again favor the wealthy. This understandably led to dissatisfaction among workers. In the past, white working-class Americans were the mainstream in the U.S. However, now they are groaning under poverty and unemployment, competing for limited jobs with the influx of immigrants. Why is the economy growing while my wages remain the same? Both the country and companies are doing well, so why am I struggling like this? Above all, the fear of being pushed out of mainstream society was unsettling. In the past, most immigrants worked in 3D industries. However, at some point they began entering factories and offices. Seeing white colleagues being laid off and replaced by Hispanic workers, there was no guarantee it wouldn't be oneself next. In such a situation, Ronald emerged in the political arena, promising to create trade regulations, erect barriers to stop immigrants, and promote U.S. manufacturing to increase jobs. Taekyu nodded. Did he accurately address the sore points of white workers? That's right. Workers who believed they had lost jobs due to factories moving overseas and immigrants embraced Ronald fervently. Politicians usually have a habit of talking in circles, aiming to evade responsibility if they fail to keep their promises. However, Ronald did not hesitate to use straightforward language. Even if his expressions were harsh, those who empathized with his policies enthusiastically embraced them. Cursing and verbally attacking others did not pose much of a problem for him. Instead, it set him apart from seasoned politicians. I asked, pondering, if you had to choose a side, which one would you lean towards? Taekyu responded with a serious expression. When I look at Chinese history books. I asked in surprise, have you read Chinese history books too? Taekyu corrected me, when playing the game Three Kingdoms. Well, that makes sense. Anyway, this story comes up. During the Battle of Guandu, Yuan Shao and Cao Cao tried to recruit a strategist. When the strategist hesitated, Guojia advised him to follow Cao Cao. When Yuan Shao questioned why he should follow Cao Cao despite Yuan Shao being strong and Cao Cao weak, Guojia explained, Yuan Shao may be overwhelmingly favorable now, but it will be difficult to receive good treatment on that side. However, Cao Cao faces 3 disadvantages, and surrendering to him may earn you valuable treatment. Following this advice, the strategist surrendered to Cao Cao, and Yuan Shao was defeated. If you've read Romance of the Three Kingdoms even once, you would know this quite famous story. Surprisingly, Taikyu's words hit the nail on the head. Even if you can easily win by staying still, will you get treated well if you go to the winning side? Conversely, the losing side will likely welcome you willingly. But in the end, isn't the winner Diane anyway? That's right. Ronald's momentum had reached its peak. The approval ratings that had been steadily climbing hit a wall at 40%. Meanwhile, Diane had comfortably maintained a lead of over 10%. As the election neared its end, the Democratic Party still held the upper hand. If things continued like this until the end of the election, it was certain that Diane would become the president. Should I make contact with that side? Just as I was thinking, a hologram appeared before my eyes. As I stood there in a daze, Taekyu immediately caught on. What's this? Did you have a premonition about who will become president? Wait a minute. Is this for real? Is Ronald really going to become president? Who is it? Hurry, tell me. Instead of answering, I pointed at the TV. Taikyu asked in surprise. Him, that person? On the screen, a Caucasian man in his 70s frowned deeply, raising his finger and shouted loudly, "Make America great again." Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Currently, the ruling party is the Democratic Party, and despite the incumbent president nearing the end of his term, he recorded a support rate of over 50%. If Diane becomes president, she is likely to continue the Democratic Party's policies, so there may not be significant changes from the current situation. However, if Ronald becomes president, no one knows what might happen. While the overall strategy may not change much, even a slight shift in foreign policy could greatly impact neighboring countries. Especially if Ronald's talk of protectionist trade policies becomes reality, countries like South Korea with a high export dependency on the US could suffer significant blows. Fortunately, at present the chances of Ronald winning were almost non-existent. But why did the idea of Ronald becoming president come to mind? Taikyu responded to my question. Is there an unexpected variable? A variable. Could it be that we are that variable? I took out the card I bought at the mart earlier. Why Trump all of a sudden? For some reason, Trump seems to fit well in this situation. I spread the cards out on the table. If we compare the presidential election to a poker game, you have been dealt 4 cards while Diane already has a poker hand. I casually removed 8 cards and laid them out on one side of the table. In poker terms, it's just below a royal flush and a straight flush. Taikyu asked, what hand did Ronald get? In reality, it's like having no pair. He would likely lose to Diane if they were to compete now. But there's 1 card left. I placed 1 card in front of Taikyu. This is the card we currently have. We need to decide whether to give this card or not, and if we do, we have to choose who to give it to. Ace of Spades. It is the most powerful card with just 1. By the way, the reason why the Ace of Spades is particularly large and beautiful compared to other aces is that it was the first card to be marked for taxation. There's no point in giving this card to Diane. The poker hand is already complete. At the point of holding 4 cards, there is no need to receive the remaining 1. What if we give it to Ronald? Passing the card means getting on board a ship. If you win, you can share the joy of victory together, but if you lose, you must also share the responsibility of defeat. Originally, it could have been a royal straight flush or just a flush or a straight. If you make a royal straight flush or a straight flush, you can beat the poker hand. But if it's a flush or a straight, you lose. But luck is on our side. If I pass the card, Ronald will complete his hand and win. So what should we do now? Taikyu asked. Who do you think should become the president? If we think about the global economy. Taikyu interrupted me. No, I mean for us. It would be good for Ronald to become the president. While the outcome of choosing Diane is uncertain, helping Ronald win would definitely bring many benefits. Then what's the issue? You saw it too. If someone like that became the president, it feels like the world would be in chaos. Even just in Korea, choosing the wrong president caused so much suffering. But that was only Korea's issue. If the wrong US president is chosen, the whole world suffers together. Taikyu looked incredulous. When did you start thinking like that? The so-called righteous person caused financial troubles domestically when smartphones exploded, and during Brexit they drained the foreign exchange market. I replied defensively. At least I didn't cause those incidents. Don't you know it's not the virtue of a gentleman to profit when others are in trouble? Why did this kid suddenly become so smart? Regardless, this situation is a bit different. In the past I reaped the results when someone else caused the problem, this time I am the one causing it. The repercussions could be even greater than Brexit. Do I really have the right qualifications for this? When you look at a strategy book. Surprised, I asked. You read strategy books too? Taikyu corrected himself. In the webtoon Phantom Go King, this phrase is used. What phrase? In response to my question he said one word. Ascension Husalta. It's a famous saying in the world of Baduk, instructing to capture the opponent's stone after securing one's own. It's a striking statement. Taikyu placed his hand on my shoulder and said, regardless of how Korea is doing or how the world is doing, don't worry about it. Let's first find a way to live and then think about it. I nodded my head. It might be good to meet with both sides first. Anyway, we have good cards in our hands. If Diane wants our cards, we can reconsider. Diane had an interview with the Wall Street Journal. The reporter was very friendly towards her. There was no doubt that they would write a good article. After the interview, the reporter said, "Since it may be difficult to meet later, I will tell you now. Congratulations on your election, Madam President." Diane chuckled pleasantly. "I'll save that for our interview after the election." She shook hands with the reporter. As she got into the car, her secretary and chief strategist were waiting. "What's next on the schedule?" "We have visits to an orphanage, nursing home, and a charity event organized by a foundation." Diane sighed. Another hectic day, it seems. The campaign had been intense since it began. A few days ago, she almost collapsed before getting into the car. Ronald attacked her, questioning if a woman who couldn't even take care of her own body could lead a country. The chief strategist, Joel, said, "We received a call from Golden Gate." "What's it about?" "The CEO of OTK Company wants to meet you." Diane raised an eyebrow. "Which company?" "It's an investment firm with a mysterious identity. They are currently a major shareholder in several U.S. startups and made billions in the foreign exchange market during Brexit." "Ah, I've heard of them." She nodded. The incident where OTK Company attacked the foreign exchange markets of the UK and Japan was so famous that even the general public knew about it. Financial institutions that bet against them suffered heavy losses, including prominent Wall Street investment banks and companies. Why do they want to meet now? Already in a strong position with sufficient campaign funds, there was no need to create rumors by meeting with a company with a bad reputation, especially when the current government and the Democratic Party were already under scrutiny for their ties to the financial sector. "Please convey that it's difficult to change the schedule." It was a polite way of refusal. Joel also agreed with Diane. "Understood." Henry said. Diane declined the offer. I nodded in disappointment. Too bad. It was somewhat expected. Still, I had some hopes since Golden Gate introduced me to her. Does this mean my chances of meeting Diane and getting her support have gone down the drain? How about Ronald? He's currently campaigning in LA, but he said he can spare 15 minutes before my flight tomorrow. I sighed with relief. That's fortunate. Even though they are both in California, the distance from Silicon Valley to LA is as far as from Seoul to Busan, if not farther. The US is practically a country of its own, with each state being like a different nation. Henry cautiously asked me, "But do you really need to meet Ronald?" Unlike Diane, Ronald doesn't seem to have much chance of winning. I see you share the same thought. Looking at the current political landscape, not many people would expect Ronald to win. However, this year has been full of surprises. Who would have imagined Brexit happening? May I ask the reason for your interest? I chuckled. I'll tell you after I meet him. We arrived in LA a day in advance. Ronald was staying in his own Stamper Hotel VIP room. Before entering, security guards searched our bodies. They used metal detectors and we had to remove our shoes. We even had to leave our phones for a while. Taekyu spoke in Korean. Do we really have to go through all this? Just bear with it. We're meeting a US presidential candidate. We entered the room where about 10 people were gathered. A large man sat on the center sofa and a young white woman stood beside him. Her name was Veronica, a Czech model who married Ronald 12 years ago. She was his third wife while he was on his fourth marriage. The man on the sofa looked at us and said in a deep voice, "Are you here because Diane didn't meet you?" Taekyu was taken aback. "Oh. How did you?" I quietly nudged him to be cautious. It seemed like he knew about our attempt to contact Diane. Considering the important election, having a spy in each other's camp wouldn't be surprising. After all, our contact with Diane wasn't a significant secret. Thinking about it, I started feeling uneasy. What if meeting Ronald also informs Diane's side? Ronald stood up. Despite being a 70-year-old man, his height of 192 centimeters and over 100 kilograms gave an imposing presence. His wide suit and thick tie looked somewhat comical. However, sticking to this style had its reasons, making him appear even larger. His overwhelming appearance made me wonder if I would lose even if we fought here. Of course, before that, we may get shot by the security guards. As a businessman, I was curious about who the CEO of OTK Company always causing trouble was. But I didn't expect a young Asian. Referring to him as a businessman was sarcasm used by the media to imply he wasn't suited for politics, but saying it himself was unexpected. Maybe he sees politics as a form of business? Judging by his actions so far, he doesn't seem to have strong political beliefs. Even the policies he proposes don't align much with traditional Republican values. I reached out my hand. "It is an honor to meet you, sir." Ronald grabbed my hand. "Pleased to meet you." He didn't just lightly hold my hand. He gripped it tightly as if showing off his strength. As I winced from the pain radiating from my hand, Ronald chuckled and released my hand, jokingly commenting, "Seems like our young friend lacks strength." My hand was already turning red. Ronald looked at Taekyu and asked, "Who is this friend?" We had submitted our profiles before the meeting, so he should have known. Did he not read them? "He's just a companion who came along," felt like an inadequate response. Taekyu is the second in command at OTK Company by title. I spoke my mind. He is the COO of OTK Company. Taekyu gave me a questioning look with his eyes as if asking, "Since when was I the COO?" I responded with a knowing look, "From this moment on." With this, OTK Company now had a CEO and COO structure in place. The lack of any other employees beneath us was a problem. "Let's sit for now." We sat on the sofa. "Time is short, so let's get straight to the point. Why did you want to see me?" The area of the United States is nearly 100 times larger than that of Korea. With such vast land to cover for campaigning, every minute counts. Being the CEO of OTK Company got me a 15-minute slot with him. Otherwise, it would have been impossible. The worst-case scenario is Ronald losing despite my help. In that case, I'll have to face the consequences, and I cannot expect any support from the upcoming US government. But there is a prediction that Ronald will become the president. If I don't assist Ronald or choose to support Diane, could it disrupt the prediction? However, in this case I gain nothing from it. Above all, the fact that I met Ronald must have already been made known to Diane. Without saying a word, Taekyu muttered something under his breath beside me. "That damn Ascension has out." I got straight to the point. "I want to help with the candidate's election. Are you going to stand on my side?" "Yes." Ronald burst into laughter. "Haha, do you think I'm in trouble because I'm short on election funds?" The campaign funds Ronald has amassed are only half of Diane's. The reason for such a drastic difference is that most wealthy individuals, including entrepreneurs and financiers, sided with the Democrats. Again, the U.S. presidential election is fought with money. The largest portion of campaign funds is for media advertising, and Ronald has cleverly utilized it. He constantly made controversial statements on social media and during public speeches, and the media criticized and condemned him for it. In response, Ronald lashed out at the media as liars, and the media fiercely countered, leading to ongoing verbal battles. Meanwhile, Ronald's popularity continued to rise. He seemed to embody the entertainment industry, saying it's better to have negative comments than no comments. If I had thought of providing funds, I should have come earlier. What good would it do to show up with money when the election is almost over? Well, I wouldn't refuse if they offered it anyway. I want to offer something more important than campaign funds. What is it? Victory in the election. Ronald chuckled in disbelief. The young friend speaks interesting words. As you know, the candidate is currently behind in polls. If it continues like this, Diane will win, the man behind me remarked with a serious expression. Perhaps choose your words more carefully? His name was Toby Rush. As the husband of Ronald's eldest daughter Irina, he was currently serving as the chief strategist in Ronald's campaign. I casually remarked, "It's true that we are significantly behind in the polls, aren't we?" Ronald gestured dramatically and said, "You know that opinion polls are all nonsense, don't you? Is this about Brexit?" I nodded my head. "You're right. Perhaps the candidate's actual support is higher than in the polls. But that doesn't necessarily mean it can beat Diane." The people around us looked at us with sharp eyes. Taekyu subtly turned his head away, but I confidently met their gaze. They probably know that I am right. But they probably wouldn't want to hear it from someone else. Ronald leaned back on the sofa and said, "How do you plan on bringing victory to me?" "I'm curious about the method." The candidate pledged to revitalize the collapsed American manufacturing industry and create jobs for Americans. Ronald nodded at my words. "That's why I want to become president." But politicians making promises during elections is not uncommon. Diane is attacking the candidate for making unrealistic promises as well. Wait. When the chief strategist Toby tried to speak up, Ronald raised his hand to stop him. What do you want to say? I'll change those promises to cash right now. What? For the first time, a look of surprise crossed Ronald's face.